Yes, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. Yes, yes, y'all. What's up? It is day 18. No, yes, it's day 18, principle 18 on Black History Bootcamp 21 Pleasure Principles. This is your girl, Vanessa. That's your girl, Morgan, chuckling in the background. We're walking in different places. If you tuned in live, that was Misha B with Rosa Parks. Apropos for our conversation today about the Queen, who I will refer to for the rest of this conversation as Mrs. Rosa Parks. I'll tell you why in a minute. But just want to welcome everybody to the walk. Where are you walking at today, Morgan?
I was deep sleep about 4 minutes ago. not even play sleep. I don't put this. I got on a sports bra I worked out this morning, which I'm feeling good about. Got on these big old, like, you know how you have dad pants? I have on these mom shorts that are like big and flowy. A big old straw hat, and I just put a little denim shirt on top of it. I'm outside my door. I'm walking out now, y'all. I was sleep.
I believe now. I believe that. No, look, this is where I got to get into Trisha Hershey Nap Ministry bandwagon of just like maybe I'm team walk more than team nap, but team walk and team nap together. Y'all, that's a double whammy combo. That's a double whammy combo. If you don't know where to start on your own self-care journey, like we need more, our bodies, Morgan used to be married to a sleep doctor, and so you know all the science behind this, but like our bodies need so much more rest than we actually give them.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it's almost criminal to wake somebody up. It's like, it's so bad. I mean, even like particularly the mothers out there, this is just a public service announcement. Kids need more sleep. They need more sleep. Yeah. Half of the like behavioral attention issues is that they're just not rested enough. And particularly kids who are like middle school age, they just need more sleep. Like the school day even starts too early, given like sleep science and sleep medicine. And so, yeah. So, I mean, like,
and that means parents need more time off and more flexibility at their job. So we know it's a cycle, y'all. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I know you got a really juicy show for us today, but also when we're talking about life expectancy, there was just a huge body of groundbreaking research that came out that said one of the best ways to increase life expectancy is to sleep more. And so, y'all, let's just sleep. Let's turn in early. Let's stay in bed. Let's take naps. And then power naps, if it's like, you know, like under an hour, those are so good for you. They're so good for you.
Baby, good. You've been getting them good dreams. Yeah, your body just being feeling so good. I got up early. I set my alarm for 2:30 a.m. because I called my cousin last night. My auntie was flying to Seattle, and I'm just, I'm helicoptering it over here while my cousin is really in the trenches. So I called her because my auntie stayed with my cousin and her husband. I was like, she's leaving tomorrow. Y'all need anything? And then my cousin's like, well, since you asked, yes, she needs a ride to this airport. Because they live all the way in Maryland, and my aunt was flying out of Virginia. So it felt actually good to be in service of my family. And then, especially after the beautiful love note that you wrote to Black Love yesterday, if you guys aren't subscribed at GirlTREK.org, if you click join the movement, that's how you get the weekly emails. And when I tell you, Morgan and I are really trying to just hold space to have authenticity, to have truth telling, and to be instructive around what the movement needs to happen. And so we send an email out either from me or Morgan on Mondays, and then we send one out on Friday that's more programmatic. But after that email, I was just so happy because my man he showed me so much love in this way that I'm just like, I didn't even have to ask. He just set his alarm. He just got up. He even got the car all extra clean. He put a water bottle in the back for my auntie. He waited inside the airport till the people came with the wheelchair. I mean, he just showed her so much extra care and love. And when we were driving home at like 4:30 in the morning, I was just like, this is the love I prayed for. It's the Rosa Parks and her husband type love, because Rosa Parks had a beautiful Black love for many, many decades. And in learning about her story, one of the things she said she felt sad about is that her husband got sidelined so much in the story of the retelling of the story. And she said she didn't appreciate it. because he was such a significant part of her life, and how
I
he
love
loved
that.
her. Yeah, was such a significant part. And one of the reasons that we know a little bit more about Rosa Parks is because just recently, like in the last 2 to 3 years, the Library of Congress, after more than like 2 decades, I think at least 1 decade of like back and forth with like her family's estate and a bunch of people, was able to finally release to the public a huge archive that had been hidden. And it has like her journals from when she was younger. It has pictures of her family, her grandmother. It has her husband's barber license. It has like her own like notes to herself, and it reveals such a different side of her. And then when I told Morgan we were doing Rosa Parks, she was like, "Oh man, I wish you had saw this documentary," but I had saw it on Peacock. It's called The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. And the 2 women who did that documentary also relied a lot on that archive. So it's so good she wrote her own autobiography in like the 80s or the late 80s, but even she said that it's different when you're writing for an audience than when you're writing just, you know what I'm saying, like for yourself.
It is.
And so the profile of who she is, thankfully, is changing so much, and the conversation is changing so much, because I think that we've a little bit done a disservice to her image and her story by not making it as complex as it really was.
I'm convinced it's because of the way she looks.
Yeah, me too.
Similar to how we were talking about like Mary McLeod Bethune, how we don't like see her as being like, you know, some particular way because of the way she looks. And it's rude and it's mean and it's not right. And when I saw The Rebellious Life, which is, first of all, the women who did that's just a brilliant even title, Rebellious Life of Mrs. Parks. My jaw was open. I was like, she did what? And then she did what? And then she did what? And you know, all of you are co-historians with us. And so as soon as we released the email today, I just started getting text messages. And then from our resident historian, Shay, he was like, and then this, and then he was sending me all this stuff where she really was radical. So I can't wait to get into this. I can't wait to learn.
Look. Well, first of all, the 2 women who did the documentary, their names were Yoruba Raishan. She's a Black woman, a documentarian. And then there was a writer and educator who I think is actually here in D.C., but her name is Joanna Hamilton, and she wrote the book, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. And man, she, in this interview I watched, talked so beautifully about the fact that she named her Mrs. Rosa Parks in the episode. And she said a couple of things. One, she said, "We think we know her, and Rosa Parks just rolls off of our tongue, but we roll it off of our tongue like she's not really ours or not really a person." And so she was like, I needed to bring back that she could be somebody we didn't know at all, because she really wasn't. And then she said also, and every person she talked to who knew Rosa Parks referred to her as Mrs. Rosa Parks. And she said, and they did it fastidiously, and they did it with intentionality, because they wanted to bring respect to her in a way that they felt she hadn't received it. And so she was just like, she had actually gotten some pushback on it, but she was like, there was no person I talked to who knew her who did not call her Mrs. Rosa Parks. And so
and
I just really love that part of the story. 3
people that we know knew her.
Yeah.
3 people. First of all, shout out to GirlTREK supporter and Black man who we love, Brian Stevenson, who is doing the Equal Justice Initiative. He talks a lot about how she just really wrapped him in her arms when he started doing the justice work, getting juveniles off of death row as an attorney. And if you don't know who Brian Stevenson is, there is a movie about him called Just Mercy that featured Michael B. Jordan. And the real guy is Brian Stevenson, and he is a good ally of GirlTREK. And then Evan, whose wife and sister-in-law we just talked to, he talked about growing up going to the soul food restaurant and seeing Mrs. Parks. And then Miss Martha,
our new favorite person, Miss Martha.
Our new favorite
I love
person
Miss Martha.
who says she's my second mama. Is she your second mama too?
Yeah, she is.
She is. Miss Martha has Martha's Place down in Montgomery, and she is the protege of Georgia Gilmore. She's a cook. She's just a sage. She's a beautiful soul. She talks about Mrs. Rosa Parks coming in, Mrs. Parks coming in to her restaurant. And so I think that woman is just in calling this woman exactly the way that she deserves, with reverence and respect. So yay! Vanessa, thank you for doing her today.
And it's a great day to talk.
Where you scared to do it.
You scared. Look, that's why I was like, look, God bless all these historians, but we're gonna go in a lot of different directions in this conversation. But it's a great day to have the conversation because I also want to uplift that on this day, June 27th, today in 2015, our girl, really a woman who is carrying on Rosa Parks' legacy, Bree Newsome, climbed up that flagpole at the state capitol in South Carolina and snatched that flag down in protest against what happened to the Charleston Nine. And so today is the anniversary of that super courageous act. Yes, it's today. Yeah, and we got to talk to her, and there's a special episode on blackhistorybootcamp.com that you can listen to of Bree in her own words. And this is a blessing, Morgan. Look, we sat down with the protege of Georgia Giltmer and just had some delicious food, and she poured into us just like 2 weeks ago. We had a whole conversation with Bree Newsome, who we're now celebrating. Like we have gotten the blessing
that
to
episode
be
today. Yes,
I hear you. We should.
I hear you.
Yeah, Marcy, are you listening? We should reshare that Bree Newsome episode. I totally agree.
Yeah, Bree Newsome is brave, and she is kind of in the ilk of Rosa Parks, where it's like she's doing the work. While everybody else is talking about it, she's like, bump that. I'm not asking permission to save my own life. I'm doing the work. So I like even that reference.
Yeah, me too. I really do. What do you feel like you know most about Rosa Parks?
That she sat down so that we could stand for justice. That's what I know. I actually know that she was an activist before that, and that her sitting down on the bus was a radical act, and it was planned out, and it was strategic, and that she had already mentored so many people, and in fact she had a relationship with Claudette Colvin, who I don't know when people position Claudette Colvin against Rosa Parks.
I know. Yeah, even we did it, by the way, and I mean, I did it because I'm sure I named that episode, but I felt so bad when I saw it this morning because I went back and looked. But we did a beautiful episode on Claudette Colvin, and then it's called The Real Rosa Parks, and I was like, oh, I got to rename that right away because they're individual women. They have nothing, there's no opposition there, and they're the building block of a foundation that goes together in such a beautiful way. So yes, it is one of those things where
it is a forceful relationship. Yeah, it's just easier to do that. It's easier to do that. And we were fighting for justice for Claudette Colvin, who's still alive, and I hope she hears this. We were fighting for justice that her story be recognized and that her bravery be recognized. And we were leveraging the legacy of Rosa Parks, which felt ubiquitous in order to do it. And I just don't think it's necessary. I agree with you. I don't think it's necessary. And I'm excited. So, I mean, one of the things that Vanessa and I have been walking towards down in Montgomery, and in doing that preparation, I learned so much more about her. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I felt
so brave.
And there's one thing that you said where you're like, that it was, strategic what happened and not an accident. That's true, but actually not true. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. It was strategic that Rosa Parks herself had been trained. She was trained at the Highlander School by Septima Clark, and it was a white family who she worked for as a maid, who was like, this woman is genius. They pulled their money together to send her down to the Highlander School. She trained under Septima Clark down there. She attended several leadership trainings with Ella Baker. She was involved in a lot of things, but on that day, she was also tired. And she was like, oh God, I got to tell the whole story. Let's start at the beginning because it's really important. Let's start at the beginning. So, first of all, she was born in Tuskegee in 1913. And that matters because, one, I made the mistake, but luckily caught the mistake before really quickly of including Outkast's Rosa Parks on the playlist for today because I love that song and I was like, oh, this is dope. And then I was like, even we can open up with it. But then I was like, I'm pretty sure Rosa Parks had something to say about it. And sure enough, she was in a lawsuit with Outkast about that song because she felt like they were using a lot of profanity and just weren't honoring her name in a way that she wanted to. And everybody has a right to be like, nah, don't use my name for this. And so it's just amazing, though, to think that this woman who was born in 1913 also was born and alive in a time that she could hear Outkast music and have an opinion on it. And that matters because Rosa Parks lived to be 92 years old. And I talk so much about the women's stories that we share here, and a lot of chronic disease and early death shows up. But Rosa Parks is a woman who lived a full life and a long life. And she had a lot of real practices that I think rooted her in that. Every single morning she had a tablespoon of olive oil. Now, she said it kept her skin good, and she said it kept her hair good, and it's just
I'm
like,
doing
I don't know, but
I'm doing it. Yeah, that's great.
She was also known as a phenomenal cook. Everybody said that her chicken and dumplings were so good, but then at one point her doctor told her that she needed to cut back on meat, and so she just went totally vegetarian, and she was just like, anyways, the best things I cooked were already vegetarian for the most part, so she said she didn't have a problem with that. And then
the theme, Diane Nash, who's still alive, who was a civil rights worker, is also plant-based. And Angela Davis is plant-based. And Rosa Parks, y'all, it's a theme.
And Rosa Parks, yes.
Yeah.
And many of you may have seen in the last 5 years these very famous photos that came out. There's 3 snapshots of her where she's doing yoga. One of them, she's in bow pose with her legs pulled back. And those photos were discovered by a professor at the university, a Black woman professor. She was either at University of Georgia or Georgia State. I can't remember. I think her name was Stephanie, but she had got access to those archives at the Library of Congress, all that stuff. And she went through all of them and discovered these photos of Rosa Parks doing yoga. And all the people then wrote articles, right? They was like, oh, Rosa Parks was a yogi, Rosa Parks was a yogi. And a couple of things that are important about that is that she actually, long before any of those photos taken, in interviews, she talks about how her mother taught her the art of morning stretching. Now, did her mother have the language of yoga? No. But she grew up in a household. She didn't need the language of it. Stretching and yoga is just look, go back to the Alice Coltrane episode. Yes. So she actually grew up in a
my
household.
sister, who is an uber Christian missionary, she does classic morning stretch every morning. I've been trying to get her to do yoga for 20 years. But PBS called it classic morning stretch. Now she be doing it, her calves looking all good. I was like, dang, it don't matter what you call it. It matter what you do. Yeah.
It don't matter what you call it. Don't matter what you do. She learned it originally from her mother, but then around the age of 58 years old, she did become a devoted yogi. And she didn't just practice, she practiced at a studio, and she didn't just practice at a studio, but she often brought her young niece. She didn't have any kids, her and her husband Raymond, but she had a lot of nieces and nephews, and she actually often brought them with her to practice with her. That's how integral it was in her life. And so those things matter when we say that she was born in Tuskegee in 1913, but she didn't pass away until 2005. And she experienced
Be courageous, check. Olive oil, check. Plant-based, check.
Yes.
Yoga or stretch, check. I'm just saying.
That's it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Kiss it. Keep it simple. So Rosa was born in Tuskegee in 1913. She was her mother stretched to put her in school, and I mean, man, putting somebody in school in Alabama in 1913 was a stretch. But her mom stretched to put her in school, and she was until the age 11 going to a regular school. But then her mom was like, "You need a skill, and a skill that's going to be more profitable." So her mom sent her to seamstress school, and she famously became a really adept seamstress. She eventually then tried to go back to high school, but then in the middle of high school, several of her family members got sick, and she had to drop out of high school. To the story of so many people, she had to drop out of high school to care for them. And then her parents split, and she eventually went to go live in another part of Alabama with her grandparents. And it was with her grandparents and that town, which I think was called Pine Ridge or Pine Lane, something like that, where the KKK had a total grip on the town. And a couple of things were happening to Rosa there. One, the KKK was literally riding by, doing night rides and terrorizing the Black folks. and her grandfather would be out on the porch with a shotgun, like I wish you would. And Rosa famously said in those same archives, as the text you sent me, she was like, actually, I wish he would get one and kill one of those Ku Klux Klan. She wasn't a pacifist. And another thing happened, that she was getting beat up in the town by the white kids. And she was like, I fought back every time. She was like, we were scrapping every day. She didn't use the word scrapping, but she said fighting. And she was like, because there was just the word scrapping. She said
God, I just
never
got chills in the back of my scalp because I remembered the caller yesterday. Yeah, well, the caller yesterday saying her dad, I think, was from Alabama, and how he had that gun, and then he got killed in police custody.
Yeah, in the Rainer Vista Project. Yeah,
it's so terrible that, I mean, we have survived such terror. We really have survived terror. And even as far north as Seattle, that, you know, that still, like, our fathers feel the need to protect us, like, by any means necessary, is just, and lose their lives for it. 2 generations later is just,
yeah. It is. It is.
Yeah, so
but I got chills thinking about Rosa Parks scrapping back, because to your point of the photos that were shown of her, they show her in such like a docile way with her hair back in the bun. It's why there's that one famous photo of her with her hair cascading down on the side when she's a little older. That's even very famous, because that was even one of the very different images that we were able to see of her. But of the fighting, she said, as far back as she could remember, I could never think in terms of accepting physical abuse without some form of retaliation if possible. So she was just like, I was out there fighting every single day, fighting for my life.
Vanessa, when them little girls used to beat you up when you had on that yellow dress, did you fight back?
Yes, every time. I one time at Zion Christian School got slapped 6 times because I wouldn't get out of the line for this girl. Y'all, she slapped my glasses off. We were playing double dutch. I had waited in line. It was raining in Seattle. We still had recess in if it rained, because in Seattle you just keep it moving. And it was dark as hell also, because Seattle don't get no light hardly in the wintertime. So you mean I woke up, it's in the dark, I'm in the rain, I done waited patiently. This girl is now married to a famous R&B singer, so I will not say her name, but she was like a bully. Not only was she a bully, but she was very light-skinned and had green eyes. And so she had a preferential treatment in the city that it was like, this dude thought their gold was growing out of her shoes. And she acted that way. And she was like 3 years older than me. And so she came up to me and she was like, I'm next. And I was like, no, you ain't. She was like, I'm next. Now, I couldn't really fight back at that time, y'all. I was only like 8, but I stood my ground. Okay, she said, "Pow." And then my poor friend LaShonda was standing there like, oh my God, what's happening? She said, "Pow." The third slap, my glasses fell off. Pow. But I was just like, I was like a tree. I know that girl was like, what is happening? Because she eventually just had to leave. I got slapped 6 times. But so I didn't have my strap on.
We're going to have a whole conversation about violence and nonviolence tomorrow, so we can continue to slap it.
Oh, I love this. That's perfect.
Yeah. It's good.
But something beautiful. So that was her life growing up in Alabama. She was front and center, directly in the heart of Klan country, fighting for her life against all of these white people who at every angle were trying to stop her, prevent her. And she said segregation was such the law in Alabama that there was not even any concept that it wouldn't be. Something changed in when she was like in her late 20s or mid 20s, I guess, because she was born in 1913 and this happened in 1932. But she met a man named Raymond Parks. Raymond Parks, he light skinned, and she was like, he was too light skinned for me. Now, Rosa, you light skinned too, but we don't discriminate, Rosa. We don't. She was like, at first she thought he was too light skinned for her. But I love this story of Raymond Parks because there's a photo of him and he's so handsome and he's so suave. He himself wasn't able to finish school, but he went to barber school. He became a really popular, shout out to the barbers of the world. You are therapists, you hold space, you are so many things for Black men.
Wait, she stayed married to the same man that whole time? Because I know when she went to Detroit, he was still working as a barber.
Yes.
Wow.
And he was active in the NAACP. And do you know where he took her on like their first date, Morgan? He took her to a rally for the Scottsboro 9, which were the 9 Black boys who were who were falsely accused of raping this white woman. And they went to this rally, and she said she was just radicalized from there, that she realized that she could not just have this rage, but that, you know, there were people who were organizing around it. By their second date, Raymond was smart. He asked Rosa to marry him, and they got married.
Don't beat around the bush. Don't beat around the bush.
This is the best part of the story. He then encouraged her and supported her to go back to school and get her high school diploma. I feel like crying when I say it, but it's like, y'all, if you don't got a man who is not looking for the places in which he can push you, not try to hold you close, not try to keep you away, but trying to encourage you and push you out into the world to be your biggest, then you don't got a man who is a Raymond Parks. So yes, so she, at that time, only 7% of Black people in the country had a high school diploma. She graduated in 1933, 1 year after they got married.
Oh.
Yes.
That's like Medgar Evers and Myrlie Evers when she went back to Pomona after he was killed to get her bachelor's.
That's right.
I love this so much.
I love it too.
Black love.
And so they were living in Alabama. She was eking by a living as a seamstress, just working really hard. She had decided to go and work for the NAACP. The NAACP was brand new in Alabama. This is super early. I'm not talking about 1960 something. This was like 1948 when she started working. She was like the second member. The first person who started the NAACP down there was a Black man named Edgar Nixon. Now, God bless Edgar's soul, because he's a serious organizer who did some real work, including he was the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, or Pullman Porters, whichever you want to call them, there in Alabama. And he brought
Mr. Ed Nixon is maybe the most underrated civil rights activist. You know, other than ask Aunt Cynthia, Medgar Evers needs to be number one. He needs to be number two. You know what I mean? He's like that important.
Yeah, he was very important. Now, he had some outdated ideas about women's roles within the movement. And he had gone on record as saying, like, women need to be in the home, but then also he needed a secretary. So he was like, well, actually, because that's how it be, y'all. They be saying one thing but needing another. Okay, just that's a lesson too. So she started working for the NAACP as the secretary, but quickly what she really was, and I love this image of her. For some reason, when I think of this image, I don't know why, but who was the little girl in the book who was the investigator?
Encyclopedia Brown.
Go around and find a clue. Encyclopedia Brown. Okay, for some reason, I kind of think of a cross between Carrie from Homeland and Encyclopedia Brown. But Rosa Parks was the investigator for the NAACP. So she wasn't just a secretary. They would send her into the field. She would go hundreds of miles away to investigate around reports of injustice and bring them back to the NAACP. Specifically, they would send her out.
She could be seditious because actually she was a woman and she looked a particular way. You know, this is also a thing because, you know, Myrlie Evers was also the secretary for her husband. And even I think about, you know, we have to teach our daughters the art of sedition. And I think about, I told you last week that Mia Birdsong, who's really a powerful woman, her executive assistant is a GirlTREK member. And then yesterday I found out that our board chair, her executive assistant is a member of GirlTREK, and she was her new executive assistant. She was so excited. And I was like, that brings me delight to think that these powerful women who are making, you know, the Tyrenes and the Siobhans who are running organizations essentially are like this kind of, you know, under the radar kind of seditious power base that can then make all the decisions, plan all the time, and make all the calls. That makes me really excited actually to think about.
It does. It makes me excited too. So yeah, she was out there investigating, and a big part of what she investigated was sexual violence against Black women. And she would go and take the firsthand testimonies, and she would help gather the evidence. And there was a very famous rape of a Black woman named Reese Taylor in Alabama.
Oh yes.
And she was gang raped by a group of white men. And it was Rosa Parks who led what at the Chicago Defender at the time called it the strongest campaign for equal justice to be seen in a decade. She led a letter writing campaign and then formed the Committee for Equal Justice for Miss Recy Taylor, and really powerfully organized people around that case. So that was one of her, like,
Recy Taylor? Have you seen her picture before ever?
I want to say no, but maybe I have if I knew how to look at it. Is she a brown-skinned woman with a hat on in the picture, and the hat is kind of tilt? Okay, yes, I have seen that picture. Yes.
And the reason I say that is because she reminds me of actually one of your close friends who just visited you, and she looks like she would have been one of our friends. And there's something about how she's looking at the camera. First of all, there's something brave about, let's just also name her for telling her story. Because she was so brave in telling the story that these men raped her. And then for Rosa Parks coming and organizing behind her truth is just like one of the most underrated stories in Black sisterhood and Black women power, and feminism. You know what I mean? This like powerful womanism.
That's right.
Is exciting to me to think about. But there's just something about her picture that she just wasn't going to take it. You know what I mean? Like she just reminds me of the women we know that are so strong.
So in addition, so she was an investigator for the NAACP. She was the secretary for the NAACP, y'all, and she led and launched the youth program. And it was through the leading and launching the youth program that she met a young Claudette Colvin. And that is how, and everybody was going through the trainings that the NAACP was doing, because there were multiple people throughout the South and specifically in Alabama who were challenging segregation laws in many different ways. And then what would happen is when they would do it, the attorneys and stuff would look at the case to see, could this be the marquee case that we take nationally that provides the momentum that we need? So it had been happening and it had been happening. Well, Morgan, one thing to know is that—
Can I also give one little bit of context too about the bus system? What was happening at that time in Montgomery in the bus system is it had become so tense because it was the staging ground for like productivity is riding the buses to work. And most of the bus riders were Black and most of the bus drivers were white, and it became a stage for violence. So they would do things like, first of all, you had to get on the bus and pay, and then you had to get back off the bus, walk to the back door of the bus, which is why it has a back door like that, and then come in the back door and sit in the back. So a lot of times what started happening is people would pay, and then they would get off to walk, and then the bus driver would drive off and leave them. Stuff that was just petty. It's just like petty racism. And it's just like, you don't have to be like that. And it started enraging people. And so there was a whole bunch of standoffs, even before Claudette Colvin, where a man was actually killed and the police came out to stop the argument between the Black man and the bus driver, and the police killed him. And I'm just saying, like, a lot of things actually happened leading up. So it was tense already. That's why they were using it even as an example to teach the youth like how to stand up. So none of this was just like Rosa Parks or Claudette Colvin just like, you know, being a superhero it was, but it was building up in the context of we ain't taking this no more as a people. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to give that context.
Well, that context is so important because one of the little known facts that I discovered, I think is one of the most important to the story, which is that it was December 1st, 1955. So just keep that year in mind when Rosa Parks didn't get up that day. But in 1943, so that's like 12 years earlier, the same bus driver who she didn't get up from that day did that same thing you're saying to her.
Yep.
The same bus driver, his name was James Blake, did that to Rosa Parks and drove off and left her. And it was raining. And she never forgot that this had happened to her. And so on that day, she did not wake up thinking this was going to happen. I'm going to have civil disobedience on the bus. She didn't. She had been trained at the Highlander School under Septima Clark. She had attended leadership training under Ella Baker. She was working at the NAACP under the man who started the Pullman Bus Porter. She was organizing the youth programming, but on that particular day, she was sitting on the bus tire. And she had gotten on the bus, sat at the bus. The bus had gone 3 stops and started to fill up with white folks. That bus driver got up and moved the sign from where it was to behind her, and then said, now you're not in the right section, you gotta go. She moved over to the window to allow somebody to sit, and the guy was like, nah, you gotta go. And she just said, just like she was scrapping when she was younger, she was just like, I was tired of being pushed around. And so on that very famous day, December 1st, she didn't get up. But there's another second fact that is maybe more powerful. In August of that year, this happened in December. So the summer ended with the death of Emmett Till.
Yes.
In November, 4 days before she didn't stand up, they gathered at Dexter Baptist Church, the same Baptist church where Morgan and I broadcast live from on the one of the last boot camps, and we've talked about it so much. Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. They gathered there, and a man stood up. There were several activists there, George Lee and Lamar Smith, and there was a speaker named T.R.M. Howard, and they were civil rights leaders from Mississippi, and they had headed the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, and they were there to deliver the news that the men had been acquitted who killed Emmett Till. 4 days before. So she said, I was sitting on that bus, still fresh in my mind from having been at this rally just 4 days earlier at Dexter Avenue, with the idea of Emmett Till in my mind and the ideal that his killers were going to go free. And I just wasn't going to get up. And so she famously didn't get up. She was famously arrested. She was fined $14. But more importantly, that became the case, because we live in a place of politics and looks and all sorts of things, that the folks behind the scenes were like, this case is the case that will galvanize people. And that became the famous start of the official Montgomery bus boycott, which is so powerful.
It would be powerful.
Yeah.
It is also connected to yesterday's talk about grief and how we grieve justice.
Yes.
And a trauma response that, like, sometimes even your bravest thing is to feel and to feel angry and to feel like no more. Like, that's the bravest thing. But to, like, get herded like a zombie, you understand what I mean? It's, like, not always that brave. Sometimes you just have to wake yourself up and say, this baby was killed and nobody's going to pay for it. Like, that's so powerful, Vanessa. It's so powerful. It's so powerful.
It's powerful. And then there was one other fact that I loved about this story that I learned. After she got out of jail, like, that evening, the next day, basically, like, they all congregated, right? And they were like, what they gonna do? They're gonna do this thing. Shout out to the hero. I really think this woman is the hero of the story. Her name is Joanne Robinson. She was a professor at Alabama State College, and she was young. And this woman had a mimeograph machine, y'all. That's basically a printer before there was printer. And this woman handmade 30. She was
doing that before. She was doing it before.
She was doing it.
This is actually what, when me and you be laughing at each other, because it's like, I thought of that already.
Yes.
She already knew it was coming. That was my point. The buses have become so crazy.
Yes.
She had already started planning it. So then when Rosa Parks had this, she was like, it's game time. She already had it planned. She already had the
Morgan,
and everything planned for a boycott. Yeah.
But that, they printed an additional like 20,000 flyers in like 48 hours.
They was like, it's game time.
So that they could mobilize. Yeah, they had to
stay ready.
They had to
get ready.
Yes. Yes.
It was like the Women's something commission.
Political Council.
Women's Political Council. Yeah, they had already had a plan. She already had the flyers. They were already going to boycott those buses that were acting ignorant. They were like, we are the majority holder in the bus revenue. We will shut this whole thing down.
That's right.
Boycotting more. And so they too were waiting. It wasn't just the lawyers. They was waiting for the right case at the right time and the right emotional tenor. Yeah, and they probably also were inspired by the rally that happened at Dexter. So I'm just saying all of this happened at the same time because people were staying ready for justice.
And
let me
faithful,
just say
and
something
faithful
real quick.
that it was going to come, and faithful that it was going to come.
Right now, the Supreme Court is deciding on a couple of important cases. Speaking of civil rights, one of them is around affirmative action. Well, one of them just got decided about Alabama, about gerrymandering. Shout out to who worked hard for fair representation, particularly for Black people, particularly for rural districts where we get more representation, and they don't gerrymander us, and that has implications for the entire country. And they just won, even in a conservative Supreme Court, on the Supreme Court. So yes, and shout out to that. Right now, there are a couple of cases. There's one for student loan forgiveness for Biden. There is one for one for student loan forgiveness, one for affirmative action, and trying to dismantle affirmative action in schools. And then second one is for LGBT rights, because there is a graphic designer guy who don't want to do a website or something. I don't know all the case, but it's about like figuring out where the free speech starts and where equal rights starts. And so it's just interesting now that we are still in the Supreme Court making decisions on whether or not we are going to further justice for everyone to have equality. And it's so fascinating that we are still here and waiting for these. It's
fascinating, and it's connected to Rosa Parks, because Rosa Parks came out harder than she had in over a decade against the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. And she petitioned hard because she foreshadowed so much. And she really, and people were like, if the mother of the movement is telling us this ain't good for us, and it's still getting pushed through. And it matters because one of the court cases that went away that it really shouldn't have last week was the indigenous water rights, and 5-4, they voted that they don't have access, the indigenous folks. And so all of these things matter.
I never heard the Supreme Court in the news more in my life. I guess it's because the presidential election's coming. Why are all the cases getting pushed through this fast like this? You know?
I mean, I think that during the Trump presidency, they intentionally put the federal judges in court who would put the cases that they knew would change the tide, and ran them up the flagpole when they knew that the court numbers would be on their side. And so they're intentionally pushing through legislation in court cases that they have been wanting to, and stack the court in a way that they can change history and define history in this moment.
Wow.
And it's the judges even below the Supreme Court level that are deciding, right, which cases are getting pushed up. And so they're all over. They're embedded in really very strategic ways, and they're ruthless. It's one of the biggest criticisms of the Obama presidency, of all the great things he did and all the ways he advanced. Is in terms of judges, there was a big gap where we didn't make the progress we needed to make. RBG still stayed in office, like all these things, and we could have probably put somebody on the courts had she retired. And then, of course, right before Obama was about to leave, then they stalled his nomination, and then he wasn't able to get somebody in, which was a huge deal. So it's like almost unprecedented that Donald Trump was only a one-term president, and he was able to get 2 Supreme Courts confirmed under him.
Yeah. Y'all, please vote. Democracy matters. Black History Bootcamp is a blueprint, and the entire civil rights movement was about the Voting Rights Act. One thing I didn't mention yesterday on the Myrlie Evers episode is that, well, first of all, Kennedy was killed right after Medgar Evers, which is just crazy. It was just such a concerted attack on progress and justice. But before that happened, John F. Kennedy sent the day of his funeral, he was buried in Arlington Cemetery, and like the day of his funeral or the day after, the week or something, he sent a draft of the Voting Rights Act to Myrlie Evers first. And I was like, that's so powerful.
That is so powerful.
For her to like review.
It is so powerful.
Yeah. So
Morgan, what year was the March on Washington? 1964?
Why do you have to do that to me? That's ignorant. I don't know. 69, 59, okay. 61. Let me look. Keep going.
I'm not 100% sure, but you always be knowing the dates. So I'm bringing this back to Rosa Parks because she did this act. The Montgomery bus boycotts happened, successful. Now we have this woman who everybody is celebrating and everybody is praising. And she is like, thank you for praising me. I'm here to keep doing the work, right? Like that was her attitude. But then the next big thing that happened was the March on Washington. And she also said later in life that she was saddened by the fact that it was so male dominated. and that the only woman who was on the bill to speak that day only got a few minutes, and it was Daisy Bates. This is a shout out to Miss.
Hold on.
Okay.
Edit this in, producer. Ask me again. Oh, you mean August
Morgan,
19th?
what? August 1963. Yes.
Thank you, Reverend Morgan.
Yes. So by this time, Rosa Parks is like well into her established work, and yet they have this.
I want to correct the record there. You said Daisy Bates, which is important, and also Josephine Baker also spoke at the March on Washington.
And Josephine Baker.
And Josephine Baker. And the woman that we're talking about tomorrow sat on the stage. And all of that ain't enough because the women were making the movement happen, and it became this kind of political gesturing. Even we talked about for Mahalia Jackson, she's the one who said, "Tell them about the dream, Malcolm. Tell them about the dream." Right. So I'm saying women was making it happen at the March on Washington. Oh, Martin. They were
making it happen. And you know who ticked Rosa Parks off? A. Philip Randolph. So he then has some sort of video.
Tell me.
Ooh, the most stunning breadbird. First of all, just flew by though. Okay, and sorry, y'all become a bird watcher. This is what you happen when you start walking. So
oh my God! Did you know that the guy in Central Park who got accosted by Karen?
Yes, he now has a new show on National Geographic.
Yes, he's cute too. Yes, the Justice. Yes, we watched it last night.
It is the Justice. But A. Philip Randolph did a tribute. He did a tribute to the women of the movement at the march, but he did the tribute. They was still there, right? So then they had Rosa Parks stand up and wave.
Talk about A. Philip Randolph.
Look, I love him, but you know, men's be men's. So they had her stand up, and she's like waving to the crowd, just like, you know, I'm just a figurehead. And she was like, there I am, just waving, but I ain't got nothing to do with nothing, and don't feel this. So shout out to Sisterhood, because Miss Lena Horne grabbed Mrs. Rosa Parks and led her around the crowd to every European news outlet that was there. And she was like, she said the American news outlet she already knew was going to go to an angle of men. So she went to the European news outlet, Miss Lena Horne. First of all, there's a video of Miss Lena Horne just running herself to the stage. She runs all the way up to the stage. She grabs.
This is so good.
She grabs the microphone. She can't even recall what she said, but she said something for like 30 seconds. Like, basically, I got something to say, like, woody woo, what's up, woody woo. Like, if I only got 30 seconds, y'all gonna be like, woody woo, GirlTREK, and y'all gonna be like, GirlTREK was up there. So, anyways, Lena Horne grabs her. She takes her around to all the European outlets, and she's like, "This is the woman whose name you need to know. This is the woman whose story you need to know."
That's like Anna. And just like Rihanna. Yes. That's like
Anna. Yes.
I'm saying that's so powerful. So powerful.
It is so powerful. It is so powerful.
I love this act. Never heard my voice. I love it.
So that was the 60s. That was what was happening with Rosa Parks. Unfortunately, the powers that be in the world were so effective at shutting both Rosa and Mrs. Rosa Parks and her husband Raymond out of jobs in Alabama that they decided to move to Detroit. They moved to Detroit.
Here was the thing.
Yeah.
She really was radicalized, and she was outspoken, and she never said what people wanted her to say. She always spoke truth and love, but she didn't play the put me in the corner pretty girl. She didn't play that role. Right. She was brave and courageous, and there's no space for that. There's no space for that. And you talk about A. Philip Randolph and Ed Nixon, who were Pullman porters. Like, this was the time of like this like stoic Black man. I'm in a suit. I'm a pastor. You know, women sit on the front row and put the hanky on you. So all of this, you doing yoga, you got these two braids, you like talking about like radical theories and all this kind of, there was no space for her. And so in a tiny, quaint place like Montgomery, even though she had become a national hero, people were still trying to stay in their place and live with white people. So nobody wanted to be associated with Rosa Parks in Montgomery.
That's right. And but it's more powerful because
it's crazy to me.
It is crazy because I wrote down when I was doing the notes, I wrote down Audre Lorde's quote, "There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." And I wrote it down because one of the things that people were complaining about Rosa Parks about is that she was involved in everything. She didn't believe that there was just one place where we could actually put all of our eggs and then break down the systems. She thought we needed to focus on the unions, and we needed to focus on the jails, and we needed to focus on education. And I loved it because so many people tell GirlTREK we got to just stay in our lane. So many people tell GirlTREK is just like, oh, that sounds complicated. And it's like, no, we are like Rosa Parks. We understand the intersections of what's happening. We understand how things feed off of each other, and we don't live single issue lives, so we can't have a single issue struggle. And she was that woman. And to your exact example of, first of all, she loved Martin Luther King, praised him a lot, but also said that it was Malcolm X who was her biggest hero. She named him specifically in several things as her hero. She also got heavily involved in political prisoner cases, including Angela Davis's. She was involved in the Wilmington 10. She was involved in the Republic of New Africa, which was a whole new movement about reparations. She was one of the biggest people. When she got to Detroit, she started working for Representative John Conyers, and she specifically started working to him because he was one of the first people in the country who opposed the Vietnam War. She became a big anti-war activist, and she was against that. People said wherever there was something going on, the Black Power Convention, the National Black Convention, the Cobra Convention, the Free South Africa, they were like, she was everywhere. She was everywhere fighting for people. She was at some of the
That's why they invited Brian Stevens to her living room. That's what I'm saying.
That's right.
Was so active and progressive. She was active and progressive. We cannot relegate her to this mousy person who was too tired. No, she was a radical activist. Really was.
And yet, Morgan, she was still a caregiver. While all this was going on, while she was showing up in all of these major ways, she said her husband fell sick with cancer, her brother fell sick with cancer, her mother fell sick with cancer. She said that there was a 6-month period where every single day she had to visit 3 hospitals a day to take care of the people she had to take care of. And she said that the stress of that was just really impacting her, combined with the fact that she was barely able to eke by a living. And the money, and now her husband can't make a living because he was sick as well. And the money that she was making, she was still investing a lot of it back into the movement. And so her family sunk into deep despair and into deep poverty. And it wasn't until she got her formal job working for the office of Representative John Conyers, once he got elected into office, he officially hired her, that she got health insurance.
Whoa. Yeah, how was she making money? She was doing speaking engagements or something?
Morgan, she was working in a sweatshop. Yeah, she was doing speaking engagements, but mainly she was working in what they called a glorified sweatshop, literally sewing clothes in the garment district.
In Detroit?
Literally, outside of Detroit, yes.
Well,
that's what Rosa Parks was doing.
I saw it on the documentary that her husband was working at the barbershop, below where they lived or something, and that they were living
and
off
then
of
he
his wages.
fell ill.
She couldn't get a job. Nobody would give her a job. They thought she was too radical.
Yeah, he had a 5-year battle with cancer before he passed away. And she was his caregiver. And all of them, I think, passed away within the same year. And she said she felt so alone. Yeah, she said she felt so alone. And she didn't know what she was going to do, but she just continued to do the work that mattered to her. And so she worked for Representative John Conyers. That really gave her some stability. She then famously, this story, y'all. In 1994, she's living there in Detroit, or right outside of Detroit. She's 82 years old by this time. A black man comes to her back door and he says, "Oh, somebody was trying to rob your house. I ran them off. I want you to give me a tip. I want you to give me $3. And she actually goes to give the man the $3. This young black man follows her into her house. And then he demands more money from her. But what did I tell you? She's a scrapper. She tried to fight this man off. And the man hit her in the face a couple of times, hurt her, took her, all she had was $103, took her $103, left the house. She then went across the street to a neighbor. They called the police. The police don't show up for 1 whole hour. This is Rosa Parks in 1994, y'all, at 82 years old, barely making a living, getting assaulted in her neighborhood. And what happened in the aftermath of that is all of these newspapers, who, by the way, they weren't They weren't writing about her being in the sweatshop. They weren't writing about her being destitute. They weren't writing about her radical views, but they all started writing about how the fall of the Black community is evident in the fact that this young Black man attacked Rosa Parks. And there was all sorts of think pieces that came out. The think pieces came out from Black intellectuals and white intellectuals, like what's going on, this, that. And it was Rosa Parks who had to come out and be like, y'all not going to paint this story this way. She was like, the problem is not the Black family and the Black community. The problem is the systems that I have been working against my entire life. And that's why the principle today is give them grace, then give them hell. Because she found places in her life every single day, from whether she was a caregiver to whether she was showing up at Cobra and Move conferences, where she gave grace, created space. It's why people spoke to her, called her Mrs. Parks, all of these things. People talk about that. And then also she gave them hell. She fought those kids on that, when in that town when she was little. She fought that man at 82 years old who came into her house, and then turned around the next day and forgave him and told the people, don't be trying to paint this man like that, because that ain't the story you should be telling. It is so beautiful to think of. We've been talking about balance so much here, that she was able to hold so many of those things. And for the next 10 years,
you are Rosa Parks. You're gonna fight somebody at 80. You're gonna fight somebody
I would fight somebody. And she was living up in the house by herself. That part even stung me. I was just like, what? And then she famously went in despair where she couldn't. First of all, it's a lie that the Little Caesars people were paying her rent. So I know that there's a lot of urban myths out there, but the president of Little Caesars was not paying Rosa Parks rent. She famously—
Who started that lie? He should go to jail.
I have no idea, but I have found no proof that it's true. Unless you want to send the receipts, then maybe it's true. But what I found is that she received, right, she received, because I even heard Oprah was paying her rent. So maybe all these things are true, but she received several eviction notices. Y'all, her people they were trying to evict her out of her house. Finally, some people took that, thank God, to the newspaper. And then the people who was like, we wasn't trying to evict no Rosa Parks. We saw her, she could stay here all the way till she died. So the people let her stay there all the way until her death. And then one other fact that Morgan and I have talked about a ton is that then, this happened, by the way, Morgan, I just thought this was like in the 90s, but it was in 2013. In 2013, her home in Detroit was getting ready to face being demolished. Like so many of the Black jewels and gems that we have in our community that are just getting randomly torn down and replaced with a bunch of BS and not preserving our history. Then this white man from Germany, y'all, bought her house, disassembled the entire house and took the house to his backyard and put it up in Germany. Now, Morgan, in 2018, Brown University bought the house and brought it back. They then displayed the house for some sort of little home and garden thing in Rhode Island. So what I understand is that the house is somewhere where I feel like me and you could get it. Because I'm like, wait, so the house is just—
Let's do it.
The house is sitting in storage somewhere in Rhode Island? Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know who we know at Brown University. I don't know who we know. But you have to let them know that GirlTREK, the movement of 1 million Black women, that we walk every day. We tell the stories of history. We walk in her footsteps.
Yoga and wellness sanctuary.
Yes.
We want to turn it into a yoga sanctuary for Black women.
Yes.
Yeah, a yoga shala. Oh my God, that's so good.
Morgan, I was like, we need to take the house all the way back to Alabama, reassemble the house back where her grandpa's house was down there, and they was running around scrapping, and then put it there. And then be like, she doesn't have any ideas that are too radical for this place. There's nothing that she has, everything that she has done has been in such service of her community in such beautiful and powerful ways. Yes, it's just been, her life is just remarkable, and it was more remarkable when you learned about it. She passed away at the age of 92 in 2005. Around the country on her funeral, flags from the government, every place flew at half staff for her. Several dignitaries attended her funeral. There's most recently been a beautiful bronze statue placed of her right in the middle of the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, and she's sitting and chilling, just like she should be. in it. And so, and now we have this beautiful new story, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks on Peacock, that I also
Everybody
think is
should
helping
watch that.
to tell
Everybody
a new story of her.
Yeah.
And now we have this episode. And so this is what we can do for Rosa Parks, which is to tell a more complex story of this very complex woman who did so many things that went unsung, never mind the things that we uplift that we know about.
Whoa, that was a slow clap lesson. It was so good.
And our principle again, y'all, is give grace, then give them hell. And remember, we're trying to ask ourselves, how do we experience pleasure and joy in our body? And it's like, it's a both and thing. Sometimes you got to fight your way to that pleasure physically. Sometimes you got to forgive. And we have
who exercises that principle so good? We just brought her up on this episode, is Josephine Baker. She give them grace, give them a little hip sway, look at her, laugh, flick your eyelashes to the right, and then join the military.
That's right.
She was just I'm gonna be a spy for the French. That is the power of even when we talk about ocean energy, it's this kind of, okay, I see you. Okay, send me. Okay, all right, I won't be the field reporter. Okay, let me just go. Okay, and then just be we got this whole letter writing campaign.
That's right.
It's this
and
kind
35,000 memographs that we done made. Here's our flyers. You're ready to go.
Joanne Robinson, yes. So I'm excited to be a Black woman right now. I'm excited to learn about the blueprints of how we make revolution happen. I'm excited about knowing the details of it, the details of how we support each other. From Racy Taylor telling her truth to Rosa Parks creating a campaign around it to is her name Joanne Robinson?
Horn. Yeah.
Helena Horn. Yeah. No, what is her name?
Joanne. Yeah, sorry. Look,
what's the last name, though?
Robinson. Yeah, Joanne Robinson.
It is Joanne Robinson. Joanne Robinson.
And it was the Women's Political Council.
Women's Political Council. Oh, was that the woman who was in the wheelchair? I wonder if that's the woman who was in the wheelchair with Barack Obama when they did the 50th. Remember we went down to Selma? I feel like that was her name, Joanne Robinson.
Wow, it
Whoa. It could have been, I have to look it up. Stay tuned tomorrow for fact checking. Tomorrow, but to then Lena Horne taking her hand, you know what I mean? And Josephine Baker singing on that microphone. I mean, it's just my God, Black women. My God. I'm excited about it. So y'all, here's one call to action. First of all, decide what you care about today. Decide the things you care about today. Ask a friend and a sister what you care about, and let's find ways to support each other in driving forward our own private revolutions. I really love that too. Yay!
I love it. All right, y'all. We love you walking with us. If you're live walking with us, I'm going to close us out with some Avery Sunshine, Blessing Me. I just feel like this song embodies a little bit of Rosa's spirit. So we're going to close out on this, and we'll see you back here live tomorrow.